what's happening here, if I'm looking at this guy, is, and this is a conditional statement. Again, we're going to talk about this in class. But what a conditional statement is, it's a check, right? To see if something is either true or false. That's that Boolean idea that we were talking about. Where here, let's just take this bit of code, right? This is going to say if, and then it has a comparison. So it's going to say ninja.speed is less than 10 and pirate.speed is less than 10. So in order for it's going to check and say, is ninja.speed less than 10? Okay, it is. That's true, right? But it also, because we have this and right here, in order for this entire thing to be what we call true, right? For that, yes, this is exactly it. Then both of these, because of this and, both of these statements must be true. Normally, you might just have maybe one statement. So if ninja.speed, and then that will, ninja.speed is less than 10, and that equates either to true or false. Here, because you have an and, both of these have to be true. This is important because when it gets to a conditional, if something is true, that is when it enters into the code block associated. So here, this ninja.speed and pirate.speed, if both of those are true, it enters into everything, every bit of code, indented in. That's that code block piece, right? So if that's true, that's when it runs line 59 through 61. If that's not true, if either of those were to be false, or let's say you just had one and it was false, well, then you would, it wouldn't run any of this. It would skip this code. Now, there is an if and an else. So basically, if it is less than 10 and if it's not less than 10, right? But let's say I had multiple conditions I wanted to check through that. That's where something called elif could come in. So elif in JavaScript is else if. So they're the synonymous. They're just Python calls it elif instead of else if. But it's a way that I can add an additional conditional check within my entire condition. It's called a chaining method. Now, what this is going to do, my code, is it's going to go in here and it's going to say, is ninja.speed less than 10 and is the pirate.speed less than 10? Okay, it's not. Let's say it's 12 and 12, right? Then it's going to skip that code and it's going to go down to the next one and say, is ninja.speed greater than or equal to 10 and pirate.speed greater than or equal to 10? Yes, we said that it is 12. So then it's going to enter in and do whatever lines 63 and 64 are. Let's say that it wasn't, neither of these are true. Well, then I have an additional thing that I can check, right? If the pirate.speed is less than or equal to 10 or greater than or equal to 10, sorry, then it's going to run this. Or if it's greater than or equal to 10, it's going to run this. And so what this elif is adding an additional condition to my conditional statement. Now, one thing that's really, really, really important, and there's a very popular question within coding called FizzBuzz. It's very, very popular. You probably have heard of it, or you will hear of it. Maybe you haven't heard of it. And it is a conditional statement, but the whole premise is to show that you have an understanding of how a chaining method works. And here's the big thing. In a chaining method, it always opens with if. Elif could never start your conditional statement. It always starts with if. And then as we see here, it doesn't have to have an else, but it can, right? It doesn't have to have an else though. Now, what happens is when I enter this if, I'm jumping into this chain. What's really important about that is, let's say that this condition is not true, but this condition is. Right? Well, if this condition is true, we can see that in theory, if this condition is true, then both of these are also going to be true, right? Because if ninja speed and pirate speed are greater than 10, well, then if I read this, ninja speed is greater than 10, pirate speed is greater than 10. Okay, so all three of those are true. The important thing with a chaining method to remember is once one of them is true, let's say this one is true. Once that is completely ran, it skips the entire rest of the chain. It doesn't read it, or else we would have a lot of the same code, right? To where again, if both of these were true, well, I would do all this and then both of these would be true and I would do all this stuff. So I'm sort of repeating myself. So with a chaining method, it's really important to remember that if one is true, then it's going to skip the rest. The idea behind FizzBuzz, and I think we do it with 5, 10, and 15. I think we do coding dojo and then coding dojo. That's the same. It's the same thing. Where if something is a multiple of, I think it's 15, then I want coding dojo. If it's a multiple of 10, I want maybe dojo. And if it's a multiple of 5, I want coding. Well, if I look at this, right? If it's a multiple of 5, or if it's a multiple of 15, it's always going to be a multiple of 5, right? So I might miss that. Also, every other multiple of 15 is a multiple of 10. So my order in which I create my chain, right? My order in which I create my conditional statement is important. Because if I were to say something like if, x modulo 5, which we're going to talk about modulo in class today, equals 0, then I want to print coding. Then if I said elif x modulo 15 equals 0, then I want to print, let's say coding, I'm going to say CD for short for coding dojo. Well, in what we just learned about chaining methods, if one is complete, then the others aren't going to run. If I put the 5 ahead of the 15, even though my 15 is my more unique condition, right? Then this is never going to run because any number that is divisible by 15 is also divisible by 5. So this will always be true, even if the number is divisible by 15. So what we would do in this situation is I would say if x modulo 15 equals 0, I would say CD elif, and then I would probably say x modulo 10 because same sort of thing, right? Anything that is divisible by 10 is also going to be not anything, I guess, but if something is divisible by 10, it's also going to be divisible by 5, right? So then 5 is my most common. I want to make sure I put that at the very end to where if that equals 0, then I'm going to print dojo, and then I can say elif x modulo 5 equals 0, then I press coding dojo. So again, just remembering that the order in which we do this is important, and I want my more unique conditions up at, it goes from my most unique down to my most common to prevent my most common, right? Because if I would have had modulo 5 here and anything, most of the 10s are going to be taken by the 5, and then anything that's 15 is going to be taken by the 5. Does that make sense? So it's just an additional condition that we can add. That's what elif is. And it just stands for else if. Like you can sort of think about it as an or, like if this is true, nope. Okay. But what if this is true? Okay. But what if this is true? That sort of thing. Does that make more sense, Mike? Cool. Great question. Somebody asked me to do recursion. I think it is a little bit early. I would be happy to do that next week though. I don't want to confuse people. But if you are interested in recursion, either absolutely you can set up a one-on-one with me, or I can do that next week. Great question, Michael. Any other questions, friends? Anything else I can help with?
Yeah, question for you.
Yeah.
When are you available for one-on-ones? Because I tried to do one today, but I got somebody else, which is cool. I still got the help. I just didn't know when you were available.
Oh, great question. Let me put that link. Let me get that link for you. Sorry about that. Let me log in and get that link. I'll put it in my I'll put it on our sheet. Thanks for pointing that out, Dimitri.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, friends? Anything we can go over?
I have one, but I'm not really sure if it is for this class or I'm a little bit late for it.
Okay, what is it?
So I was trying a couple of examples of really basic algorithms
Okay.
that I did on JavaScript, but now on Python. And there's something that is, I mean, not confusing, but I would like to understand how it works better. When you define a global, or not a global, like a variable
Mhm.
in your code, and then you have a function, and you try to change that variable inside of that function, sometimes you get an error. So let's say I have variable x equals 1. And then I
Okay.
have a function that increases x by 2. So x equals x plus 2.
Mhm.
That sends me an error. I think the only way to fix it is if I pass x through the parentheses in the function. So I just like to understand better the how it works, like the variables outside of functions, and how can you use them inside of functions? You know, the same
Sure.
variable.
Do you have your code that we can look at?
Oh, not here. I have it on a laptop.
Okay.
But it's basically that. If you do, let me do it really quick here. So let's say x equal to 1, and then a function that says, I don't know, add, super quick, and then I do x equals x. I'll show it to you in a minute. And then just print x. Let's see if this actually works, or I'm just nice. Print and count. How was that? Okay, y print and count. Oh, this one did nothing because I'm not calling the function. You learn these things really quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Jesus.
Also, now my link is up there for you to schedule one-on-one with just me. My calendar. Wednesdays are the only days that are really difficult. I lead a cloud computing. Yeah, I lead a cloud computing workshop, so that's the hardest one.
Okay, so you want me to share my screen just to show it really
Yeah,
quick?
let's look at it.
Let me move the screen out of here so I'm not sharing anything weird. I don't have anything weird, but just to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So share button, here you are. And screen 1, okay. So can you see it now?
Says it's starting. Okay, here we go.
So we have x1, then I have the function called add. I'm not passing anything to the function. I'm just trying to do x equal x plus 1 and print x. And I got this error right here. Let me clear it.
Try print spelled incorrectly.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, good.
There it is.
So let's see.
But if I pass x without, yeah, just x, let's do x everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit. I think it works just fine. There
you go.
So we have a global, or that's what I read, and then you have a local. But if I don't pass it through this, every time I try to do something other than printing, if I just print x, works fine. But if I try to change and define this variable again inside of the function, I get an error.
What if you try doing x plus plus? What's it do?
Oh, just like like that. Yeah. Oh, equals.
Is that x the same as that x? That looks like an uppercase x.
Let me see. No, this is uppercase. That is lowercase.
Yeah, it looks like it was uppercase. Let's try that. Let's do x plus plus.
Just like that, right?
Yeah, it should be like that.
No, I think that is already red. So, or if I do, even if I do plus equals 1, it does the same, I think. Oh no, this one works.
Yeah, I think your x was off, and I don't know why the x plus plus didn't.
Well, let me do it again.
Because plus, that's stupid. Sorry, plus plus is a JavaScript thing.
Yeah, I just don't know
plus
exactly
equals 1. Yeah.
But if I do it like this, we save it. Oh, now it's working.
You had a different, you had a
Oh,
big.
no, sorry, no. Here's the thing. It works when I pass the X. That's my
Okay.
issue. If I don't pass the X through here, I just call the function and try to get the variable from here.
Okay.
Save it, do it again.
Doesn't know.
It doesn't
Okay.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the scope here acts as a little bit of a black box. Now, this idea of global variables in Python is different than the way JavaScript handles global variables.
Okay.
So JavaScript is, yes, you could just pass this globally and then it has access to your scope, right? So that's what's called in scope, and Python acts differently that way, to where this acts almost like a black box. It doesn't know anything outside of that unless you pass that value that it needs.
If I do Y, but I use X without changing it, I think it works. Yeah, that works. Okay. I guess the only issue is if you have a variable outside of your function and then you try to change it inside of the function is when it gives me an error. Okay.
Will you go back and just do X plus equals 1? Just not X equals, just X plus equals 1.
Plus equals 1. Save.
But yeah, it's saying that it doesn't recognize that.
Yeah, it's the same error. Just local variable X refers, and I did a couple of times with other exercises and it's always the same. But I can pass, if I pass it here, if I put X here and use X, it works fine. If I don't pass it and I try to change X, it gives me an error. Which I feel is the way it works, but it's coming from JavaScript, it's obviously different. Just wanted to be sure that I'm not doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Why
don't you try print X after the add function? Are you actually changing X globally though? So I get that you're passing it, but you should print X after you run the add function as well.
Oh.
Right? So you're passing it to you're adding as a parameter to your add function, you're using it. But then do you know that X globally is actually changing?
Oh, I think they should, let me try something else. Let's pass something different. Sorry about that, just letters, because it's just faster. Let's say if I do Z equals to X plus 1. This is gonna work. And I do Z, print Z. I can use X totally fine. Oh shit, no, I didn't. Oh, I have no Z here, sorry. Let's use a different variable, yes, there. So this works, as you can see. Because, and I can use X. I can use the value of X perfectly fine inside my function. What I cannot do like this is change X. But if I pass X here, and let's change this to X and X, I can totally change it.
So what's happening here is, what if you put, so let's take out your X.
From here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then from there, and then above this, above line 4. So yeah, do a line and say global.
Oh yeah, I read that too. Oh.
Yeah, global X.
Global X.
And that is defining and saying, this is what I want to adjust and change.
Yeah, I read that, but I didn't try it. Yeah, it works. That works.
So in Python, if you want to adjust one that's out of the scope of this function, you can bring it in from the top by saying global X. It's a Python.
Okay, yeah.
And so now if you put a print X on line 9, will it also print 2?
Oh, that's a good question. It prints different things. I don't know if with global.
I believe with global we change it. So let's see.
Yeah, with global change it, I think. Yeah, I changed it 2 and 2. But yeah, that's a good question. If I do X here, and let's comment this, and I do this, it's gonna print 2 different numbers. Oh, what is wrong now? Oh, I'm passing X again. Sorry, I'm passing X again. Yeah, you're right. Jesus, what is wrong now?
You still have to pass X again.
You gotta pass X
function.
Yeah.
To change it, right?
On 3 and 8.
I just put an article in the chat that really walks through this global idea.
So here is, so 1 is the one from the function, because it goes first, and then it prints X, which is a global, and is 1. So yeah, You can use it inside of the function, but if you don't call the global, it's just gonna use it there. And even if
It'll
you
change
pass
it and then it doesn't
yeah,
change. Yeah.
it won't change the global.
Yeah. You can sort of think about
Okay.
this global as like a parent and then a child, right? And then it will
Yeah.
change it within here. Now, one thing to note is if I wanted to change the value of X, then in this case, we're changing the value of X. I do have to bring it. If I wanted like the overall value, I do have to bring in the
Yeah.
global. If I wanted
So-
to utilize the value, so let's say I want to say Y equals X plus 1, that is allowed because I'm not redefining
Yeah.
a global variable.
Yeah. So in base of this, what is the best how you go like day by day doing this? This is like a bad way to do it, like using the same variable here that you have globally.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
You know, like somebody working on a code, on a piece of code.
Mhm.
Is this a good practice? Is a bad practice? Nobody does it this
It
way.
would be more like this. You wouldn't really use the global as much. It would be more of
Yeah.
you want to create functions that are reusable, right? To where
Yeah.
it's not just we can't just adjust this one number. This is what we call hard coded, right? Yeah. So it would say num equals.
Okay. And then return X or
Yeah.
something like return num, sorry.
Yeah, you would return num, or you would even say, let's say you just wanted to add 1 to your number. You would actually
Mhm.
just say num equals num plus 1.
Yeah.
And then now that function works for any number I pass through,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
if my user if I just wanted to add 1 friend to my friend count, right? I could, or like, I think a like would be better. I don't know how many initial likes I have. I could go grab that from my user model, grab that number, and then pass in through this add, and it'll take that generic number, whether it's 5,000 or 2, and it's going to add 1 to that. So when we're creating our functions, we want to be the most generic we can in the sense of we don't want to hard code it to where it only works with
Mhm.
X or it only works with
Yeah,
Y.
totally.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or
so now
when we talk about for loops, instead of only wanting to, what's 1 to 500, we want to say, 1 to num. So my function works if I want to know all the odd numbers
Yeah.
between 0 and 10 or 0 and 1 million, right? So
Yeah.
that same function works. That's the
So
idea.
I guess this works better because I'm passing X, which X can be any other variable
Mhm.
in the code, but this is gonna take whatever you put in here and
Whatever
do the-
number, yeah. So you could say
Okay,
X, or
okay.
you could say add
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes total
25,
sense.
right? And that'll do the
Yeah.
same thing. It'll assign this
Exactly.
25 to the variable of num, and then it'll just say that. And that's where you
Okay.
could say num plus equals, and that would work just fine.
Okay, that works. That works. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
But yeah, just
Perfect.
in Python, if you do want to affect and redefine a global variable, you need to have the global statement ahead of that.
Okay.
Great
Okay.
question.
Perfect.
Really good
No,
question.
thank you. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you.
That's my favorite part about these office hours is sometimes, you guys come up with stuff where I'm like, oh, let's look. And then we just problem solve together, which I think is fun. Any other questions, my friends?
A question about range. I did not see until I was going to solutions and understand that range had that each position meant something. Say say one of the problems was counting back from 2018 to 0 with every 4 years.
Mhm.
And so I didn't realize that range in each of those places. So you put 2018 in the first slot, 0 as your ending, and -4 as your
Increment.
as your countdown.
Mhm.
So I didn't realize that range had actually defined places of what they meant.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about this in class. But yeah, so range is a numeric for loop that I can use, right? So in Python or in JavaScript, it looks like this, where I have for, same sort of thing. If you guys did this in JavaScript, where I've got var, I'm defining where I'm starting. So var of I equals 0. There's a lot of issues here because this is JavaScript code in my Python file. So I'm gonna do this. Where I'm defining where do I want it to start? I define where do I want it to end, and then lastly, where do I want it to increment by, right? That's our JavaScript for loop. In Python, we have a couple different types of for loops we can do depending on what sort of data type we're dealing with. So if I'm dealing with a number, a numerical value, that number could be the length of a list, right? I want to iterate through every single portion of my list, or it could just be an actual number. What I can do is I do sort of the same thing. I say for X just represents my iteration, right? In this case, I'm starting at 0 and I'm incrementing up, and it's just keeping track of that number I'm at. Where I want to start is 0. Where I want to end is the number 40. And how much I want to increment by is the number 2, right? So in this case, for X in range, this is going to start at 0, just like this, right? It's going to end when it gets to 40, just like this guy. But this one's actually going to increment by 2. So it's going to do every other one, right? So it's going to say 0, 2, 4, et cetera, all the way to 40. That's what would happen. So that's range. Those
Can
are
I
the
give a
three.
little tip real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So like your 2 for the increment, if you delete that real quick, and then also delete the comma.
Yeah.
So when you press comma, if you have your IntelliSense, it should pop up and tell you like, yeah, there you go. So if you do this with your different functions, it'll come up and tell you. So the first number is the start, it supports an index. The second number is stop, it supports an index. And then the third number is the step, which is supports an index. And then you can read down through there and see what it does as well. That way, if you're ever confused by a function, you can always look at it through there.
Yeah, that comes from IntelliSense. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So again, 0 represents and this is in range. 0 represents where to start. 40 represents where to stop. And then in this case, 2 represents what step or how much we increment by. Now, I can do this, or let's say, and what we're normally going to iterate through would be our lists, right? So maybe I want to just do every single one. Like, let's say instead of every other number, I want to do every single one. If that's the case, I can do some shorthand, right? Where I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to still end at 40. But if I don't put a third number, there's something we call like default values. So by default, if I don't put a third one, right, my step by default step equals 1. So if I just put 0 and 40, it's going to default to every single one. So and here we can do this. This would work as long as we only want, or we're only going to increment by 1. If we ever want to do multiples, or if I want to do every third, or I mean, most things we're doing every one. There's not very many that we're going to do like every other, unless that's where conditions, right? We would want to manipulate it through conditions. But if I was going to do every single one, I can do shorthand and say, I'm going to start at 0 and I'm going to go to 40. This is also important if I don't want to start at 0, because by default, it does start at 0. So if by default it starts at 0, the shortest hand I could do is say for X in range and just give the value where I want it to stop. So if I say for X in range and I just put one parameter, one argument, then it's going to assume that we're starting at 0. It's going to assume we're incrementing by 1, and this is the values when it stops. So those are 3 ways that we can use range. Because 0, or if I don't have anything, it implies we're starting at 0. Again, the 40 still represents where we're going to stop. And then I do need to increment by 1. Now, if I do want to do anything that's incrementing or stepping by more than 1, I do need to do all 3. I can't just put 40 comma 2 because it's just going to, it just is built if there is, if there's 2, then it defaults to, the first one is where we're starting and the second one's when we're stopping.
Hey, Will, quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I haven't done enough JavaScript to know, but in Python, that stop is not included in the iteration. So if you go 0, 40, you're going to get 40 iterations, but you don't get to number 40 though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you could do, if you wanted 40, you could do 41. The real thing that is going to be big in this is when we get to lists, because that's what we're really going to be iterating through most of the class.
Okay.
Is I could say for I in range, where I start at 0 and then I do the length of my list, right? I need to bring in my list. if I do length of list, just a little bit of recall on lists. If I've got a list, right, and I've got X, Y, W, Z. I know that that's not how, that's not in order, but here we are. Does anybody remember what this position is?
0.
0, right? 0, it goes 1, 2, 3. One of the cool tricks is if I say length of list, that is a function that gives me back how many items are in my list, right? Length of list is going to be 4 because there are 4 items in my list. And so what's cool, and Michael, way to bring that up, is when I use length of list, it's going to do 4. And we can see that the actual last value of my list is always 1 below the length. So here my length is 4. The last value, this Z, is position 3. And so just like you said, this is a way that I can go through my entire list, and it's not going to include the 4 position, but in a list, it always starts at 0. So then that works just fine. It assures we get the last item in my list because the last item is always 1 below the length. Does that make sense? I could, by
Yes.
default, because
That
I'm starting
makes
at 0. I don't have to have that. I could just say length of list. And it would run just fine.
A quick question for you, Will.
Yeah.
So in the length of my list, so you could do a slice method in there too if you just wanted a portion of that list.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, we're actually gonna be talking about slices today. You guys are crushing it. A slice is where I could basically take a value of my list and only get a certain point of it, right? So let's say I wanted the first, let's say of my list, I just wanted the first couple pieces, right? I wanted these 2, but I wanted to exclude. I guess a way to really, I'm gonna do this. We'll do it this way. Let's say I've got a list and I just want the first 3 items. What I can do is I can do something called a slice. So I could say print my list. Now, what I could do is in my slice operator, I can put where I want to start and when I want it to end. Right? And so what this would do, if I were to run this, I'm gonna go like this. Open my terminal. We can see it started at 0, right? And it got 0 and 1. It does not include position 2. That's where it stops. But now I have taken those first pieces. So if I did want all 3, then I would say 3, right? If I wanted the top 3, and it's just going to take those values, right? It creates a slice. I am cutting my list in half, if you will, but it's a great way to get different positions, right? Different positional arguments. I can start it at anywhere. I can start it at 2 and then stop it at 5. And now it just gives me X, Y, Z at position 2, 3, and 4. So it gives me that information if I wanted to. So it's just a way that I can target different things. Now, if I wanted everything up to position 5, I don't actually have to put the position of 0. I can just default and it's going, if I just put :5, like if you see that, it's saying everything up to that point. So we see this ABC 1, 2, 3, all the way up to that point. And vice versa. If I wanted to say 2, it's going to start at 2. And then if I have the colon and then there's not an argument after that, it's just going to say the rest of my list. So if I come here, I start at position 2, and then it goes all the way to the end of my list. Does that make sense? Any questions there? Again, we're going to talk about this in class, but yeah, I could absolutely do this.
Hey, Will, can you do an example of like, kind of like number 2 on the functions intermediate where it's iterate through a list of dictionaries, just like a quick, like, if you got a dictionary nested in a list, like how would I access like the key?
Yeah.
Say if I wanted to just hit the key and not the value.
We're doing that today in class too. So let's just.
Oh,
walk
sweet.
through it. Yeah. Okay, so let's say I've got this list right here. I don't really want to mess with that one. Yeah, we'll just do that. So I've got this list called capitals, right? And really, transparently, I like to do this with lists. You'll see me do this a lot when we're talking about, when we actually get into the MySQL plus Flask sort of stuff. I like to do something like this. This is how my brain works better this way because I can see my key and my value. But if we're talking about dictionaries, right? Here, I've got a dictionary called capitals, right? And then this capitals has a key of Washington and its value is Olympia, right? And so what's different about a list versus a dictionary is I can now target, instead of doing a position like I do with a list of, like, 0 or 2, here I just, if I want to target something, I target by the key name. So here, if I were to say capitals of Washington, right? So if I were to say something like this, print this is going to print me the value of that key. Which gives me Olympia, right? I target the key name. And now it is a little bit confusing because we do the brackets just like a list. But within my bracket, I pass in my key name. And what it does is it goes and gives me that value. Cool. So that's important for us to know. And I know you're talking about a list with dictionaries.
Yes.
Let me
Yeah.
go to the platform. And let me get that here. Oops. Oops. What was this? Nope, wrong one. Here we go. Let's say I had this. Híjole. Sorry, friends. Let's copy this. Come here. Oh, my Lanta. I'm gonna lose my mind.
I spam that copy button.
Yeah, I spam it too.
It said copied, so if it doesn't work this time, I'm gonna throw my computer out the window. There we go. That new MacBook Pro is looking real nice, except the price tag is not. Okay, so here, let's say, right now I need to change this back, right? So I have this one line. Instead of me going to every single one, there's a cheat code. You can do Option on a Mac, or I think it's Control. So not the Windows one, but the other one. And then you can do, oops. I click it. I can do multiple. I can change them all. So same thing, if I wanted to change all the first names to something, instead of me having to retype it, I just do this and say, I'm going to do first name, but you see, I can change them all. Just
You want to do all, it's Control-Shift-L, and it'll select
Control-Shift.
all first names.
Oh, let's see.
Like, so
Command
double click
Shift
it.
L.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah,
there you go. All first names. I know that there is, I think it's Command D. Yeah, Command D will go to the next one if you didn't want to do all of them,
Oh,
or out of the Windows D, whatever you guys call that. Anyways. Cool. So here I've got a list of dictionaries, right? Now, if I'm thinking about it, I've got, get my annotate tool out. This is still a list, so it still has positions. So 0, 1, 2, 3, right?
Mhm.
There's 4 items within my list, but this is a list of dictionaries. So if I wanted to target, let's say, I know one of the assignments says changing the last name of Jordan to Bryant, right? That's one of your core, I think it's one of your core assignment things. So let's
I think
do
it was
that.
number 1 in this assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's do that.
Mhm.
Well, in the same way, if you guys remember back whenever we talked about terminals on Tuesday, I couldn't just go straight into even though I knew a folder name, I couldn't just type CD that folder name, right? I had to go into the pathway. I had to get access to the information within my desktop And then in my desktop, I had a folder called instruction CD. And that one I had a folder November Python. And then I could start manipulating week 1, right? Same sort of thing works with a list. If I wanted to target last name here, what I could do is I could say students at, now this is a in position 0. So I'm gonna say 0. Now, if I were to just print this, whew, sometimes I work too fast and then it makes me be slower. If I were to just print this guy, I get first name, Michael, last name, Jordan. So I know I now have access to that dictionary. What I could actually do is now sort of compound my, in the same way that we would do CD, you know, we'd say the folder name slash, same sort of thing happens here. I'm at student 0, right? That is this guy. I just printed that. I know that that's there. Now I can target that name. So I could say last name. If I do this, I can run this, I've saved it, and I get Jordan. So if I wanted to change that, I would say students of 0, last name equals. I have now I will target the name of Jordan. I'm going to change the value and then I'm going to print it and it should say Bryant. So if I come here, I see Jordan, pull this up a little bit. I see Jordan. We changed the value and then I changed it to Bryant and then I printed the same thing, but now I've changed this value. I can do that with any of them. Let's say I wanted this guy. Let's say I wanted this one's first name to be Jeff. Well, same sort of thing, right? I could say students. Now, oops, this is position 2, 0, 1, 2, right? Then within that, I need first name equals Jeff. And I have to, because it's a string, I do have to do the quotation marks. If I save this and then I were to print it, maybe. Then all of a sudden it's going to be Jeff because I've now reassigned and changed. So if I come here, Jeff. If I were to just print out the entire dictionary at 2, Jeff Guillen. Make sense?
Yeah, totally. No, thanks. Actually, and as you were going through it, it clicked in my head how to actually do it. The
Yeah,
number
way to
2. So
go.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Same sort of thing if we have lists. So let's say I have a list of lists. Let's say I've got oops. Let's do even something crazier where I say okay, this is a little bit confusing, but let's walk through it. So let's say I've got this list right here. Well, let's break it down. What is actually in this list, right? I've got 3 arguments. If I were to say len of listy, I want to go ahead and print that. It should give me the number 3. Let me make sure everything else is commented out. Nope. Gives me 3, right? Makes sense because I've got 0, comma, 1, comma, 2, right? This is a composite data type. It's storing a bunch of stuff, but at the end of the day, this is all one element within that list. Cool. let's say I wanted to change this 5 to the number 12. Anybody know how I would do that?
You would index the, I guess it'd be index 2 and the position of where the 5 is. So index 2 of 2.
Okay, so walk me through it, Dimitri. What would I put here? What would I type? I'm just gonna be a robot and you just tell me what to type.
So you, I guess, listy,
Okay.
type listy, and then your little brackets.
Okay.
So that inside that bracket would be a 0. I mean, not 0, 2.
2.
And then in another bracket right beside it.
Uh-huh.
And in that bracket, there'd be another 2.
Not quite. Let's think about it.
I think it's
If I were to say listy 2, I'm gonna print that and we're just gonna keep breaking it down from there. You're super close though, my guy. So if I do this, this is my list I currently have. If I were to print this, the length of listy 2, right, which we just saw is 3, this value, and then 9, it's gonna give me the number 3. Because there's 3 items within that list, right? The 3 items are this. It is 0 is this 3. 1 is this value, which is a list. Right? These are all just 1. And then 2. So if I wanted to target this 5, I've got to jump into that as well. So what I can do I can say, let's comment this out for. I can say listy of 2, right? Perfect. That gets me this list. Now within this list, I know I have 3 items, but I want to target the middle one. So I'm going to say 1. Now, if I were to print this guy, anybody have any idea of what would print for me?
4 and 5.
4 and 5, yeah, right? If I run this, 4 and 5. So if I wanted to change the 5, I could add an additional 1. And now I have targeted this 5 value. So if I save this and I commit 5. So if I wanted to change that to 12, I would say listy of 2, 1, 1 equals 12. And so then if I were to do this, it should say 5 and then it'll say 12. I've gone in there and I have targeted that value. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? It's
How
kind of a
did you
harder
copy
concept.
your whole line without selecting it?
I'm sorry?
How did you copy or duplicate your line without selecting it?
Oh, on Mac, it is option, shift. So whatever the other one for a Windows is, not option, control, shift, and then down on the, you could do down or up, either one.
Okay,
And then if you just hold control or option, you can just move your code.
I do know that one, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how to duplicate it.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah, where did the 12 come from?
I just made that up. I said, what if I wanted to change it to 12?
Oh,
I mean, I could change it to, because it is a composite data type, I can change it to burger. And then if I were to print it, it would change to burger. And then I could print. Let's see what that looks like. Burger.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, when you printed the list, then that makes sense.
Cool. Great office hour, guys. Look, we talked a lot about what we're going to talk about today in class. So it might be a little bit of a, repeat in class, but I think it'll be probably good because some of this stuff can be a little bit higher level and a little bit harder at the beginning. So I am going to get a drink and I'm going to stop there.